Hello and good evening. Over the last few months, there have been several groups within the MyData community who have been working very hard to better define the MyData Operator. And my task, just for the next few minutes, is to try to communicate some of the enthusiasm that these teams have in that important task. Now, the MyData Operator is something that's written as a core element within the MyData Declaration. And I had a quick look online yesterday, and there are currently 541 signatories to the MyData Declaration. And I'm sure within the room here, we've got a good mix of people who've signed it, just read it, and maybe a few who've not read it at all yet. So rather than go into the details of the MyData Operator and what it is, I'm going to talk about why I think the MyData Operator is such an important idea, why it's a good idea. And I'm going to do that by telling you a simple story. So our story starts with a person. All good stories start with a person, especially if it's going to be a human-centric story. So here's our person minding their own business when along comes an internet pioneer. Now, you could rightly say that the internet will have been around for quite a long time before we saw one of these creatures. But for our person, the internet was probably a technical irrelevance until they could use it to do something useful and interesting. And it was the internet pioneers that allowed this to happen. They gave us the opportunity to do cool things on the internet. And with that, they offered to help our person store and curate their data on the internet. It made sense at the time. There was no one else around to do this. They gave our person a usable identity, something they could log into anytime, anywhere, and use to interact with other people. They told our person that they weren't going to charge them, and our person had no idea that they would ever be paid. And anyhow, there was no mechanism to be able to make such transactions anyway. And lastly, our internet pioneer told our person it's a package. There is only one package, and everybody gets the same package. Indeed, what could possibly go wrong? So we could think about this question and we could list all the things that we think have gone wrong. But I don't have that much time, and I think it would be a little bit more interesting to take another approach. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick apart this very simple model, and I'll let you decide how well that equates to your experiences. So firstly, this unique type of relationship of services packaged with no payment, direct payment, is the sort of relationships we typically, historically, have only had with our government. But civil society has had centuries to develop mechanisms to control for that imbalance of power. And in the digital age, when that's combined with an economy of winner takes all, our internet pioneer becomes an internet incumbent. And I think it's well established now that that overall packaging inhibits competition, reduces innovation. This locking together, this tight lock of services and data, means that our person can't make choices about the services that they want. They don't want the service providers they want to use and don't want to use, or even some simple decisions about data relationships. And without choice, there is no consent. Having a third party, someone else, controlling substantial portions of our person's identity fundamentally inhibits their ability to express themselves in society. The ability to pay, to not pay, and to be paid are fundamental for an individual to participate in a market economy. And without the ability to participate, they don't have the power to influence. And lastly, this bundle of services is opaque. There's no visibility of the difference between the data using services, the data sources, and there's no separation of powers. So what started out as a simple quest to do cool things on the internet, for our person has ended up in a situation where they have no power, they have limited competition and innovation, they have no choice, no consent. They have no control over their identity, no opportunity to pay, not to pay, or to be paid, no transparency, no audit, no governance. Perhaps not such a good deal as they first thought. So what's the solution? This is a very simple model, but I think it tells us something about the sorts of things that we need to be doing in the real world to drive forward in this area. And of course, we believe that MyData is part of that solution. And the way we go about this is to shift the point of integration from our historic internet incumbent towards the person. But our challenge in doing this is to achieve that without overburdening the individual. And this is the point at which we see the role of the operator. The operator sits between the person and this plethora of data services. An operator is an intermediary within a trust framework or an ecosystem with fiduciary responsibility for the individual. And this idea of fiduciary responsibility is something that we all understand in our non-digital worlds. We rightly expect that there are people out there who have a care about our interests, who care about what happens to us. We expect that of our teachers, of our doctors, of our employers, even our bank managers, and the list goes on. And in the digital world, it is the operator that expresses this role. And they do this with a wide range of functionalities, and I've just listed a few of those there in orange. So, to round up, our challenge as the MyData community is to decide what is a good operator. We have to decide how we're going to build on the MyData declaration to create codes of practice and rule books that can be used right around the world. So as my final slide, I'd like to invite as many of you as possible to join us in the effort that's been ongoing over the summer in a workshop tomorrow afternoon when we think more about the detail of what the MyData operator is and how we drive it forward. Thank you.